Hello and welcome to Balancing Act, Life and Struggles of a Teenage Girl, a mental health and wellness and semi-unfiltered podcast made for teens by a teen. I'm your host, Morea, a 16-year-old girl from New York, and here on Balancing Act, I bring you weekly episodes featuring relatable conversations, personal stories, and practical insights to help you navigate life's balancing act and related challenges, and to remind you that you are not alone. And here's a sneak peek of today's episode.
Something that is so important and I find is missing for a lot of kids and myself included. No one wants to be bored anymore. I encourage you to find time throughout your day to get really, really bored. It is okay. It is good. Be bored. That's where creativity happens. That's where you have time to process how you feel, your experiences of the day. And it'll be uncomfortable, but I can promise you the benefits of just allowing yourself to be bored and not feeling like you have to scroll or be online or even do anything. It'll be so fruitful. Be bored.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Balancing Act. In this episode, I am so excited to bring you Dr. Michelle Solomon. She is absolutely amazing. Dr. Solomon is a licensed psychologist who wrote her dissertation on the impact that social media has on young women. The name of her dissertation is Social Media and Self-Evaluation: The Examination of Social Media Use on Identity, Social Comparison, and Self-Esteem in Young Female Adults. This dissertation is so cool, and fun fact, for a while it was the most downloaded dissertation for like over a year, and then it was the second most popular dissertation, only second to Dr. Jill Biden, which is like insane. So I am so happy to have Dr. Solomon on the podcast today. I absolutely loved this conversation with her. She honestly has just such like a vault of knowledge surrounding this topic. Like in every part of the interview, she was just pulling out like this study or that study or like all of this background information that's just so cool and helps you to understand the impact of social media, the science behind social comparison, and all of these other amazing things. So, this is an amazing episode for anyone who wants to learn more about how social media impacts you, and especially social comparison. Because the truth is, the harms of social media are really just kind of like a manifestation of other aspects of being human, of social comparison, which we've dealt with forever, but now it's just exacerbated on social media. So, not only will this episode help you to understand social media, but it'll also help you to understand social comparison and all of those other things that social media really draws on, but that aren't only relevant to social media, if I'm making any sense. So I'm just so excited if you can't tell. So I'm just gonna like shut up and like, okay, yeah. Thank you so much for being on my podcast today. And I'm so excited to talk about everything social media with you.
Hi, Maria. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really
Of
excited.
course. Of course. So starting off, what inspired you to write your dissertation on the impact of social media on young women and young girls? Was there any particular personal experience that you had that made you realize this was something that was so important to research?
Instagram at the time had come out around 2010. So I was introduced to Instagram. I think I had just graduated high school and I was going into college, but I hadn't gotten it yet. And when I did get it, I was in grad school. And around that time, I noticed that I was paying attention to the details of my face, what my body looked like. I found myself getting really distracted. I had more anxiety than I typically had before. And I noticed there was a shift in my self esteem. And that signaled to me something was changing either within me or in my environment. And there's something called relational crisis. This is by Carol Gilligan. She found that around 13 years old, there's something that happens in females where they dissociate from the authentic part of themselves in order to fit some type of norm so that they could be more desirable, more popular. This is something that, I don't want to gender it too much, but she found that specifically for women, that this was this thing that just happened, that they sort of began to lose parts of themselves in order to fit this norm. So I didn't know if it was something, maybe a part of my own identity development, or if it was something in my environment. And when I looked around, I thought, what am I doing different? I was on social media a lot more. I was scrolling, I was posting, I was viewing other people's posts. And so around that time, I was preparing to propose my dissertation, and that's the topic that I chose. I wanted
That's
to
so
know
cool.
what was happening in my brain and the brain of others.
That's so cool, and it's interesting how you realize that with social media and what you said about 13-year-olds and how they reach a point in their lives where they try to do something to fit in, and I wonder what part of that is science, maybe something about puberty and development, and what part of that is societal expectations that you start to become more exposed to at the age of 13. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about your dissertation? What question exactly were you trying to answer? What were your methods and what were your findings ultimately?
So Facebook was like this, but Instagram more specifically is a really photo heavy platform. So we're looking at visual images of other people's lives. I wanted to know what that did to our brains, our self esteem, our mental health. And if you look at social comparison theory, so this is what I based the dissertation off of. Social comparison theory states that we figure out who we are in the world. It's a part of our identity development by comparing ourselves to other people. And it's of note that it's people that are most like us, right? So people that are in our peer group, neighbors, siblings, people that are close in age to us, and again, have a lot more similarities to us. And in comparing ourselves to them, we're sort of gauging where we fit in our social status, our personal status, our academic lives, our sports life. And that gives us a reflection or a sense of self. That's just an innate part of our identity development. It's how we figure out who we are in the world. When you're online, you're comparing yourself to not only just your peers, but maybe people in your town, people that you're not so close to, but you get to see parts of their lives. And what's changed since the dissertation in 2016 to now is the comparison pool is massive. So you're comparing yourself not to just your close peers, but hundreds of thousands of people all over the world.
That's so interesting to know. And so, what are the dangers of expanding that comparison pool, especially when it's on a platform like social media where people are able to kind of pick and choose what it is they want to share?
The comparison pool is too large. So if I'm someone and I'm 36 years old and I'm comparing myself to other 36-year-olds across the world, there's so many of them. I'm bound to in some way maybe be less than or fall short. This is
Yeah.
just numbers. But if I compare myself to one or two people, well, maybe I can kind of measure up to them or, they can measure up to me. So that's not having a huge impact on my sense of self. Because in terms of ranking, which Instagram does, it imposes a lot of metrics on us. How many followers you have, how many likes you get, the number of people that want to leave comments on your page.
And I'm also thinking a little bit about filters and how what you see in social media isn't real. So you're comparing yourself to such a larger pool of people, but what those people are showing you is not necessarily who they really are. So everyone around you is making it seem as if they're above you on social media, which can be so overwhelming. So was that something that you saw a lot with the people you did your study on, like the impact that kind of the highlight reel of social media can have on the self-esteem of people looking at it?
That was one of the biggest findings. So it was a qualitative study. So we were asking interviews and it was self report. All of the women that I had interviewed stated that even though they knew their friends were on vacation all the time or didn't look that perfect all the time, even though they knew what it was like to have that comparison to that person in real life, when they were engaging with the image so fast, because scrolling is really fast and you can see a lot of images at once, their brain processed it as truth.
That's so interesting because by now all of us have heard that what you see on social media is fake. But even though I know that, that doesn't mean that when I'm scrolling on social media, what I see has any less of an impact on me. So, are there any practical strategies that these women implemented to help them with this, or do you have any suggestions for you what you may do on social media to counteract how fake and how damaging and toxic, unrealistic beauty standards and just images of people's lives can be on social media?
Sure. So what ended up happening was I wanted to get to know how people are engaging with their scroll. And it's very unconscious because it's so fast. It pulls on your emotions and the most vulnerable parts of us. So the part of us that wants to fit in, wants to be liked, and wants to feel important and valuable. So you're scrolling. Then there's a social comparison that's happening unconsciously. Even though they knew that that person, again, wasn't on vacation all the time, they stored that in their brain as fact. The next part to that is self evaluation. So if that person's on vacation all the time and I'm not, what's wrong with me? I feel jealous or I feel left out. That person was at a party, I wasn't invited. That creates a sense of black and white thinking. So these really quick snap judgments that then again become stored in your brain during that social comparison and then becomes your self evaluation, how you see yourself and repeat. So it happens over and over and over again. During the study, towards the end, I asked these women, well, when you take a step back, so we were sort of, I was prompting them to really go through critical thinking, to not just scroll really fast, but to actually look at this picture. What does this picture mean? How does it make you feel? Are you having a positive reaction, a negative reaction, or is it more neutral? Almost all of them realized that it was negative. And then I prompted them to really critically think, well, how true is this? So the takeaway was when you can pause and you can regain perspective, it doesn't have that significant impact on your self evaluation. You can make a real life judgment that won't have that negative impact of I'm not good enough. There's so many studies that have recently come out that even 15 minutes less of online time can improve body image, can reduce anxiety and reduce depression. Just 15 minutes.
That's so, so interesting. So, in terms of a solution to perhaps the negative impacts of social media, it seems what you're suggesting is more mindfulness around the content that you're consuming, and then also overall reducing the amount of time you spend online. But I wonder how people can implement this into their lives because social media is sometimes used as a coping mechanism for some people. Like they use it so that they don't have to be mindful. So if you try to be mindful while performing a mindless activity or what you want to be a mindless activity, that can be really hard. And then in terms of screen time, I know it's hard for people to reduce that. So, do you have any coping strategies or advice for people who may struggle to reduce their social media intake or become more mindful?
It's an active, it's not a passive exercise. I say to myself all the time, I'll be on my phone less. 2 hours later, I'm still not on my phone less. So it really is something where it has to be active, where you say to yourself, I'm in between work or I'm in between classes. Hopefully you're not on your phone during classes, but or in the summertime, I'm going on TikTok for 15 minutes and then it's a hard stop and then I'm off. And then I want to be really intentional about making connection to a friend, going outside for a walk. So again, it has to be this active exercise. Otherwise, you'll scroll. There's two types of dopamine. One type is what we get from the quick hits of social media. I get them, you get them, everybody gets them. And that type of dopamine, because it's so fast, it's unlimited. It'll never satiate you and you'll never be satisfied. The other type of dopamine, the one that we really, really want, is the one you get from completing a task, engaging in a hobby for an hour, working on a project and finishing it, spending an hour with a friend. That type of dopamine is long lasting and way more impactful than the type of dopamine that you get from a scroll.
That's so interesting and meaningful. I know a lot of people might realize that scrolling is not the healthiest thing for them, but they do it anyway. And even if you know that it's not the dopamine hit that you necessarily want, something feels so good about just getting that quick hit of dopamine on social media. And so it can be hard to go after the larger or harder thing. The truth is, we're not going to stop using social media because it has become such an essential part of modern day life. Do you have any suggestions for how to use social media in a healthy way?
I think this is where you have to bring in again the perspective and being really, really mindful when you're scrolling. And I know this is so hard because the images are so fast and they're so entertaining. So Maybe having on your phone something that reminds you when I scroll, I'm going to do my best to be really mindful. Something that I offer to people that I work with is when you're scrolling, are you feeling positive, negative, or neutral? Positive would be something like seeing a friend doing really well or posting something that they're excited about or spending time with their friends. And you have a positive reaction to that. I feel really happy for that person. Cool. We don't have to touch that. Or it's neutral. I'm seeing this image, it's not really having an impact on me. I have a hard time believing that it's neutral because, again, even though we know what these people look like, it's so unconscious. We're all impacted by the images that we see. So I would question that a little bit. And if it's negative, that's a really good indication that it's time to take a step back. Think about short term versus long term gains. It's really important that how you spend your time is positively impacting you. We are on our phones, I think average, a study just came out like 7 to 8 hours a day. When I first did this study, I think it was 1 to 3 people had said. Now it's 7 to 8. That's the majority of our day. And what you look at and how you engage your time is what you become. So if the majority of the time it feels really negative to scroll, that's a really good indication that it's time to step back. Also, you had mentioned friendships. A Harvard study came out, I think about a year ago, and it was over the course of like 100 years. And they were pulling themes, what made people happy. What was so interesting was that it wasn't having 500, 200, 1,000 friends online. It was having 1 to 2 really good quality friendships. So if you're hoping for connection, which you can get online, by the way, you can connect with others online, get to know others online. But I think there's a lot more value in building offline friendships as well. And this is a friendship that you can call that person, you can rely on that person, they can call you. They're there if you need them. If you're talking about friendships and how to engage offline and online, I think you could do both.
It's so interesting, and that also kind of connects to the quick dopamine hits that social media gives you because social media gives you these quick things. They give you quick dopamine, quick friends. What we really want, I guess, what we're really programmed to wanting are the long lasting dopamine that you're talking about, and then also just real friends in real life. And I know that, again, we've been told so many times that social media is not good for us, and we know that, and yet we still use it so much. So when we're on this platform and we're posting stuff, what kinds of things can we post to empower other people on this platform instead of, like, having them view themselves in a less worthy way because of all of
Mm,
the upward social comparison that is present on social media?
Maria, this is something that I really struggle with. I was on a trip 2 weeks ago and I really wanted to post how much fun I had and what a good trip it was. But I struggled with, I don't want people to compare themselves to that, the 1% of my life when I'm on vacation. It was a really difficult internal battle. And so, what I would offer to people is think about who you're impacting when you're posting. That's something that I think is significantly missing from the conversation. There's a trend, I don't know if you saw this, it's called the post and ghost, where, if you're excited about something or you want to share something, you post it. And I think the intention is to not care what anyone says about you because you're posting it for you. From a self esteem perspective, that is awesome. Share yourself, be excited for yourself, put yourself out there. That's great. However, it can be problematic when we lose empathy for the other person on the other side of the screen. So if you're posting something where you were out and let's say you left a friend out, one friend didn't get invited, to not care how that person feels, I think that could be really problematic. We lose empathy for other people when we think that way. So if you are sharing parts of yourself, I encourage you to do that and be mindful. How will the other person on the other end of the screen feel? So I do something, you don't have to do this, but I try to add a good picture of myself, which is a part of self esteem, and maybe not so perfect pictures to show that it was the spectrum of emotions. It was a spectrum of experience. But again, it has to be authentic to you. It has to feel good to you. That feels good or better to me. And I try not to post too much.
That's a very important tip to show the spectrum of everything because it can be hard to find a balance between not posting at all because you don't wanna harm people based on what you're posting or damage your own self-esteem, and then also if you're posting, it can feel so uncomfortable to post the whole spectrum, as you're saying, because what everyone else on social media is doing is posting their best pictures. So if you're one of very few people who are posting not so perfect pictures, like you're saying, it can feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable if you don't have amazing self-esteem in the first place. So
Mhm.
it's really important to know that and that not everyone would feel so comfortable doing that, and it really depends on the person. I'm also wondering about the ways that we interact with other people's posts because if you go on social media, you'll see, like, if I was scrolling today, like, I scroll a lot. Something that I'm working on spending less time on social media because I know that it's actually impacted my self-esteem a lot recently because 'cause I've been scrolling more than recently because it's the summer, and I also know that it's not the best use of my time, and even though I know that, I always find myself scrolling. But anyway, I was looking in the comment section of a video, and, like, this girl was absolutely gorgeous, and yet, like, all
Mm.
these people are trolling her online
Mm.
and, like, making comments, and how should we engage with the comment section, whether we're posting or reading other people's comments? What do you think about that toxic
Mm.
energy that's always flying around social media?
This is the disconnection that I think happens on social media. It's very quick and it's so easy to type something negative about someone and post it, and then it's gone. If you were to see that person in real life, I could almost guarantee that that person writing that negative comment would not say that to their face. There's a disconnection that happens with social media. You've ever looked into bullying? One of the first interventions when someone's considered a bully is you would try to get that person to put themselves in another person's shoes. That takes time, that takes effort. It's such a fast medium, it's such a fast platform that it's really easy for people to just say something super negative and have no clue who the person is on the other end of that. What I would say is, unfortunately, there are going to be more negative than positive comments because negativity is really loud. And when people are suffering, they can be really loud. I don't think you'll find someone that's happy posting something negative on somebody else's image. So if you can, find a way or find a part of you that can have empathy for that other person.
Yeah,
What they're
that
putting out is really a reflection of what's going on inside of them, way less about the comment or the person that they're commenting about.
and that's applicable to so many different aspects of your life, not even on social media, but in person as well. And I guess kind of tying back to what we were saying about social media earlier and how what you see on social media, you know it's fake. You also know that these comments are just people trying to like drag other people down. But if you get a comment on your post that's negative, it can be so, so hurtful. So, what
Mhm.
advice do you have for people on how to deal with like negative comments that they might receive on social media or about other people who might be going through a similar thing as them? Like, if I see someone with, I don't know, brown hair, for instance, and, like, I have brown hair,
Mm,
and if someone's making really negative comments towards that person,
mm,
or, like, I'm Asian, what if somebody makes a really
mhm,
anti-Asian comment? How do you advise we
mm,
respond to these comments, both, like, how we actually respond typing out to these comments if we choose to do that, and how should we respond to
mhm.
them internally? What should we say to ourselves?
Think about calling your power back. When you see a comment, and it can be either to you or to somebody else, and it's relatable, you've given away your sense of self and your sense of identity to that person and to that comment. Call your power back. How do you feel about yourself? How do your friends see you? How does your family see you? And I would actually argue that how you feel about yourself is way more important than how anybody else feels about you. And if that in some way is lacking, or you don't feel good enough, or it's not neutral or positive, that's an indication that it'd be really great to bring back some self love and to call that power back. So that
Yeah,
regardless of what anybody says about you, you're okay with you first. There will
yeah.
always be somebody who has something to say. That was a tough lesson I learned when I did my first media appearance. You could be talking about empathy and somebody will still have something negative to say.
I get that, and at the time we're recording this podcast, I haven't actually put anything out there yet, but this is such a vulnerable podcast for me, and I've written stuff on my website, like, as part of the blog section, that is also so personal, and what I'm personally
Mm,
struggling with is how other people will respond to it, because even though I know that, people are using social media and, like, the disassociation you
mhm,
have when it's online, comments are still really hurtful.
mhm,
So, I guess shifting the direction of the conversation a little bit, we've talked about how social media can be toxic, how it can drag down people's self-esteem, how people use it as a platform to bully other people because of how separate they feel. Are there any benefits to social media? And is there any good side to it?
I think, like anything, it's a balance, and there are good and bad parts to most things in life. I go on TikTok probably more than I should, and I pull a lot of affirmations from TikTok, different ideas, different perspectives. There is a benefit to being online, but again, it has to be in balance. So I can't live my life on TikTok, but I can check in here and there and find things that I find to be valuable or things that make me laugh or things that are important to me. When Zuckerberg created Facebook, I do believe that he did have part of it as an intention for people to connect. And I think there's some truth in that. So if you live in a really small community and maybe there aren't a lot of like minded people there, you can go online and find those people that you resonate more with. I think that is a thing. But again, it has to be that balance where there's real life friendships and also being able to find your community. That's a really positive thing for people.
I so agree with that because I've been able to while doing this podcast, I've been able to go online and find other people who are doing similar things in this space of wellness, and I've been able to find a lot of eating disorder recovery Instagram
Hmm.
accounts. But then, of course, other toxic accounts come up too when I'm scrolling through things that are about food and body image. So that can
Hmm.
also be hard. And you're talking about how, like, Zuckerberg had an idea for it to connect people, but how part of that is still true, like you were saying, but it's shifted so much over time, and then now we have other social media platforms like TikTok that I don't
Hmm.
know if they're exactly made in the same reason Instagram was, and those are so much just about scrolling. So, how do you feel social media has changed since you wrote your dissertation? What advice would you have for the younger generation that is dealing with TikTok and then also AI filters and ways of
Hmm.
video editing that make it so
Hmm.
easy to post something that's so fake and such an unattainable standard of perfection or beauty?
So I've seen it in the people that I work with and my friends as well. And it goes across the age range. The desire to post a filtered image. When I first did the study, filters were just the color of the picture. We didn't have what we have now, where you can add lashes, you can make your lips bigger, you can add blush and makeup. That's a whole other game. What I found with those people, and you even see this with real life aesthetics. So changing the way that your face looks, Botox, getting rid of wrinkles. What I found is that that's never ending. There's always something that can be better. And when you're chasing that, again, it's unlimited. It'll be hard to be fully satisfied. So when I work with certain people, and again, my friends and myself included, I try to get people to appreciate, accept, and love who they are right now. When you can do that, that builds self esteem, not chasing something outside of self. The other tricky part about posting a filtered image is the disconnect from online self and real life self. So when you post that image, you now have set it up where that's how you want to look always. You are now comparing yourself to the version that you posted online, and you feel less than that version versus accepting and loving yourself as you are in this moment. That can be really problematic.
That's so interesting, and that so resonates with me because even, like, not filters, but, there are ways that you can pose in front of a mirror that make your body look
Hmm.
so different from the way that it actually
Hmm.
looks, and as
Hmm.
someone, who's dealt with, like, body image and eating disorder stuff, sometimes I'll go back and look at pictures of myself where I'm posed in one of those ways, and I'll compare myself to that, and then it really drags
Mhm.
down my self-esteem. So, what do you think we can do to combat this filter thing and only posting our ideal selves on social media? Do you think that we should not use filters, or do you think that that's something that's even possible to do?
In an ideal world, I would encourage Instagram to get rid of filters. There was a study that came out. It was Jonathan Haidt. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's a professor. He asked his students, if I paid you to get offline, would you do it? I think that was the beginning of the study. And they all said, well, first, is everybody else going to be offline? And he said, yes, they'll be offline. Okay, you can pay us and we'll do it. At the end of the study, it went so far as the student said, if everybody gets offline, we'll pay you,
Wow.
meaning, right? So, yes, we're all online, but I'm not sure that we all want to be online. They said we would pay you if we knew that everybody else was offline. Oh, then we can get offline too. I think if
So
Instagram got rid of filters, that would be ideal because it's in our hands. Why wouldn't we pick the filter that's going to make us look better? We're human beings. Why wouldn't we want to look our best self, even though it's not our real self? What's also really interesting is there are these two female psychologists. I don't know how they did this, but they were able to anonymously interview people that worked at Meta. And they found out that it wasn't psychologists or medical professionals or healthcare people who created these filters. It was like young males in their 20s.
what?
Mhm.
Okay, so
To get my point?
ooh, okay, yeah, that's so okay, that just shows you a little bit more how the female beauty standard is completely created by males and
There you
so
go.
unrealistic. That just makes me feel so much worse about filters and oh,
Yeah,
okay,
icky, isn't it?
it's
Mhm.
not even for, like, female empowerment and to, like, show your true female whatever, it's, like, how
Mhm.
to look better because males want women to be more attractive to them.
Right.
That's okay. That gives me,
Mhm.
like, the
And maybe that'll change how you see filters. Again, Instagram pulled on our most vulnerable parts, wanting to be liked, wanting to be loved, wanting to belong, and wanting to have good self-esteem. So it's a tricky thing to ask people to stop using filters.
Like, as humans, we're kind of part of, like, a pack. We have herd mentality, and
Mhm.
it's just in us. So if everybody else is on social media, we wanna be on social media. If everyone else
They
is
want to be
using
on social
filters
media.
and looking better, then we also want to use filters to look better because then we feel left out. So I guess,
Mhm.
do you have any practical tips or things that you might say to yourself? I know motivational sentences and mindful
Mhm.
sentences really differ between people, but do you have any specific things that you would recommend people remind themselves of while they're scrolling on social media or trying to post something or just looking at other people's posts?
Totally. I cannot stress this enough. Social media is not designed for everybody. Hard stop. It's just not. There are people who can post and don't necessarily view other people's images. They're fine with just posting and that works for them. And this isn't a hard fact, but I have this theory that there's posters and there's viewers. A viewer, especially a viewer who is more susceptible to things like anxiety, low self esteem, and depression, they're going to be really impacted by their daily scrolls. To me, that app is not designed for you. It's not going to add value to your life. It's going to take away. Maybe it's something where you go online once a week so that the rest of your life is spent in real time, where you can make those innate social comparisons with somebody who looks as they are in person with a wrinkle in their shirt, maybe so their hair's out of place. That's a real life comparison. Social media is not for everybody. It's not for me.
Honestly, same, but then I have Snapchat and it's like, I have to keep up
Mhm.
my Snap streak, so then I go on there every day and then I end up
Mhm.
scrolling. So it just feels like there are all these things that keep pulling us back to social media. Do you
Yeah.
have any tips for how to if we realize that we're not a social media person, how
Mhm.
should we get off of it? Like, do you have any practical tips that people can implement today? if they realize I want to get off social media.
Mhm. And what's interesting is Snapchat's pulling on your desire and your very basic human need to belong. I want to keep those streaks going. I want to have friends. I want to fit in. Again, to interact with social media, it has to be active, not passive. An active example would be deleting Instagram, deleting the app for a week, taking 3 days out of the week where you do not look at that app so that you are forced to be in real time in your body, in your emotions, in your thoughts, and in your feelings. I'll read this to you actually. So, this was from a trauma specialist, and I really, really like this exercise. At the beginning of every day, because Instagram is so mindless that we forget about our intentions in real life. At the beginning of every day, maybe starting off with what do you want to feel? Who do you want to connect with? And what do you want to accomplish for that day? That's helping you to recenter, to refocus on yourself, and to think about your own personal goals. The tricky part about social media is we're just watching people's lives play out, which can be really entertaining and problematic and exciting and all the things, but then we forget about ourselves. Another thing I would offer too, again, to reconnect with self, I call this the 10 fingers of gratitude. I had a patient who called it the good and gratefuls, which I really like and I'm going to use. But at the end of the day, thinking about, and there's a mind body connection. So you want to put a finger down every time you say something that you feel grateful for at the end of the day. So I really liked that the sun was out. The day was really warm, or I had a great coffee. I interacted with a friend. I finished a homework assignment. And then you go all the way until you get to 10. That can combat some of the things that happen online. Because again, when you're online, you're engaging in this where do I fit in? And I'll tell you too, whether you get a million likes or 10 likes, it's all relative. Maybe a million likes isn't enough for people, and that makes them feel less than.
That's so interesting.
As humans, we're always looking for validation, but then sometimes, no matter how much we get, it's never enough.
And the tip that you shared about writing down your intentions for the day, I think I'm gonna start doing that because I always start the day and maybe I'll look at Instagram and then I feel like, well, I've started my day out unproductive, I guess. So I guess my whole day is gonna be unproductive and then it's so hard to get back on track. But if you have
Mhm.
what you want to get done, and as long as you try to follow that structure, that can be so helpful. And then it's not super related to social media, but you were talking before about looking at people in real life and like a wrinkle on their shirt or their hair. How should people go about comparison in real life, whether they're like putting other people on pedestals or kind of dragging them down to make themselves feel better?
Mm.
Because it is real
Mhm.
life and you think that what you see is like the real person.
Great question. What I would say first is if you can, do your best to make age appropriate comparison. You're 16, you can't compare yourself to a 30-year-old. They have years on you. That's what I'm finding now a lot in my practice is really young people are thinking that by the age they're 20, they should have $20 million because they saw somebody else do that online. So be really careful about making age appropriate comparisons. The goal would be to not compare yourself to other people. The goal would really be comparing yourself to maybe who you were even yesterday. If you find yourself that you're only comparing yourself to other people, do your best to acknowledge that it's happening and then recenter, realign, check back in with yourself. How am I doing today? How do I compare to the person that I was yesterday?
That's so interesting and meaningful. But on the flip side, and something that I struggle with is comparing myself to who I was in a place where I may not have been as healthy. Like I was saying before, I
Mhm.
struggled with an eating disorder. And so it's like comparisons to how I looked then, or maybe I was more productive one day. So I'm comparing myself to my most productive day. So, what advice do you have for self comparison when it can be toxic?
If you find that that type of comparison is giving you a negative experience, I wouldn't suggest that for you. I would offer radical acceptance of who you are in this moment. Can you find parts of who you are today that you feel okay or good about? Doesn't have to be perfect. It could be something as simple as I got up today. I went and poured myself a cup of water. I brushed my hair. Even just getting up, it can be really, it can be something super small, but finding anything that you can feel grateful for. about who you are today. And I offer these exercises and I want to make it clear that it's not a one size fits all. So, what works for one person may not work for you. You have to find an exercise or a practice or an intention in your life that feels good for you.
I totally agree with that because we often see people on social media posting their affirmations, but sometimes they seem
Mm,
so outlandish and like we'd never actually use them for ourselves. And so
mhm.
I have one more question for you. So I
Go
know you
for
were
it.
talking about like affirmations have to vary between people, but for you, what
Mhm.
advice would you give to your teenage self if you could give her one piece of advice?
Good question. That you'll be okay to not take life so seriously. And the same advice that I just offered to you, be in the moment and accept who you are in this moment and stop trying to be anybody different than who you are today.
And self-acceptance can be hard, but it's
Mhm,
so worth it to try to strive for, like, radical self-acceptance like you were saying.
mhm.
So, where can people learn more about social media and the impact that it has on people's health, and where can people learn more about you and the work that you've done and that you're continuing to do?
I actually haven't read this book yet, but I've seen clips and different postings. The book, The Anxious Generation, I think it talks a lot about mental health for adolescents and young adults and kids. And it really integrates a lot of the social media piece. The author of that book also wrote something in The Atlantic about social media and kids and the anxious generation. I would highly recommend that. For me, you can find me on ZenCare, on Psychology Today, and on my website. It's drmichellesolomon.org. I would say Instagram, but I don't really post a lot there. So probably my website would be the best thing.
Before we end this episode, is there anything else that you think is really important for the audience to know that we haven't touched upon yet?
I'll say one more thing, that perfectionism or perfect doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's
It's not
something
a
that
real
I'm also
thing.
that's what I'm working towards too. Like accepting that perfectionism is not real and unattainable.
Unattainable. Social media tells us otherwise, but that's a really good reminder that it's not something to strive for.
Thank you so much for being
Oh,
on my podcast today.
you're so welcome. I'm just so grateful that you included me in
I'm
this
so
podcast.
I'm so grateful that you were able to come on. I feel like when I'm writing down my list of what I'm grateful for tonight, you're definitely going to be on there. The fact that we can have this conversation and then hopefully it'll help people who are listening. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. And I learned so much.
Oh, thank you, Maria. And you will be on my grateful list tonight too.
Thanks. Okay, so like that was a pretty cool episode, right? Right? Hopefully, maybe. Okay. I'm gonna hope that you thought it was a cool episode because I thought that it was a cool episode. And I know that Dr. Michelle Solomon is gonna be on my grateful list tonight. So here are my biggest takeaways from our conversation. Starting off, social comparison is really essential to our identity development as humans. But social media makes this comparison pool too large. And not only are you comparing yourself to a lot more people, but you're comparing yourself to these people's highlight reels, which are just not real. The second thing that's kind of related to that is that, we know that these highlight reels are fake, but if we're exposed to so much of it, that can make our brains process it as truth. Our subconscious thinks that those highlight reels are real, even though we know that it's not, but that can still really mess us up. And then the next thing is kind of adding on to what I just said about knowing that it's fake. So, regaining perspective helps to mitigate the negative dialogue that comes from social media that's constantly telling you, you're not good enough. So, it really helps to be mindful while you're on social media. And trust me, I know how hard that can be. The next thing that I thought was so cool and about the science behind social media is that social media gives us those quick dopamine hits and lots of like friends. But those dopamine hits and those friends that we have on social media are not necessarily the ones that we want, meaning they're not what our body is actually craving. We want the long lasting dopamine that we get from completing tasks and projects and all that stuff that she was talking about. And we want friends in person. And then when we got to talking about how to actually interact with social media, Dr. Solomon shared that it's important to post a wide range of how you're feeling if you're comfortable with doing so on social media, because that helps to put the real you out there, which is less toxic than just that highlight reel. But I completely understand that not everyone's comfortable doing this, and that's also completely okay. Another thing she said that was so interesting was that nobody who says mean things is actually happy about themselves. Things that other people say to you that are mean are really projections of their own insecurities. And I think that's just so important to keep in mind. It's not about you, it's about them. That's why they're being mean to you. And then the final thing that she talked about that I think is so important is that social media is not designed for everyone. And I know it can be so hard to get off if everyone around you is on social media. But if the reason why you're on social media is just because everyone around you is on social media, then you should really consider taking a step back and putting yourself first, what you want, what you need. Because if social media is having such a negative impact on your life, it's not worth it to be part of that just to like fit in with everyone else. And then finally, radical acceptance when it comes to comparison, knowing that even though I may not look the way that I looked before, I'm still worthy. And even though I don't match up to what everyone else is like on social media, I'm still worthy. And I know how ridiculously hard it is to internalize these things and to make yourself truly believe that you are worthy. But hopefully, with enough time and with enough practice of just loving yourself for who you are, you'll be able to reach that spot. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. It was a great one. I know it was. You may not think so. I hope you think so. But I know it was. And that's all that matters. Radical acceptance. Thank you for listening to this episode of Balancing Act, Life and Struggles of a Teenage Girl. If this episode resonated with you, or if you know someone it could help, please feel free to share it with your loved ones or on social media. You can find us on Instagram at balancingact.podcast or on our website balancingact.life, which are both linked in the description. If you really want to support the podcast, leaving us a rating, hopefully a good one, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify would be invaluable. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, or if you want to suggest a topic or person for a future episode, please feel free to reach out to us through social media, our website, or email, which you can find on the website. Thanks again for taking the time to listen. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and remember, life's a balancing act, and sometimes you fall on your face, but you are not alone.